Thank you very much. I'm loving being here already, and I'm loving what's been said about being in person, because there's so much of what's happening already that I've been familiar on the internet, but hearing about it in real life, I echo that completely, as I hope my talk will. So I'll now just say exactly what Esther just said. Lovely to be introduced by Esther. Thank you for that. So these are my publications. I do have some merch with me, so do come up. Can I just say I'm going to try and keep it quite, keep on top of the timing. So whatever I mention and don't go into any detail, please, if you want to hear more, just come and talk to me, because that would be brilliant. So the first was my graphic memoir in 2011, and then based on my PhD for a general reader, and then my PhD book. Currently, I'm working on, this is a page from Yield, which is the story of the Black Mountain College experiment. So Black Mountain College, if any of you are unfamiliar, was a radical community for learning, which challenged the world to think differently, learn differently, and live differently. And so it's completely this synergy with being together in person and breaking bread. And I think that's what I've already experienced coming here just yesterday. So my uncle was one of the founders. I'll just read you. Nicola, could you fetch me some ice in my glass? He was this alcoholic drunk when I knew him in the 80s. What's the book, Uncle John? It's about Black Mountain College. What was Black Mountain College? So it's my memories from my diaries of talking to him in the 80s about this. So my story so far, as Esther said, my background, social anthropology in the 80s, and then it was called then Taught English as a Foreign Language for about 10 years. I did a little bit of arts training, but officially I'm an autodidact. And then what happened was in 1995, I had a child, met my partner who became my husband later. We had a lovely little son, and then when he was 2 in 1995, he died, and it completely transformed my life. And I was talking to Ava this morning. It's sometimes when something awful happens, out of it comes this massive learning, and actually you look back and you think, well, actually it's quite lucky, which sounds really odd, but it really grew me. So I wrote a diary at the time. But what it did do is it made me draw, and I started, so I became, officially I'm a self-taught and autodidact illustrator, and this was the sort of thing I was doing after Billy died, so it wasn't about grief, it wasn't about anything heavy, it was funny little cartoons that then got me work in editorial work and for small charities, which I did for about 10 years. A year after I started that, I was able to give up teaching, which I hated at the time, and so this is the type of work I did later on. And then I was introduced to the long-form comic or the graphic novel in about 2008. And because my style was quite cartoony, you can see from that, people were giving me Mouse and Persepolis and saying, oh, I think you'll like this. And I was thinking, oh, maybe I could do that. Oh, but I need a story. And then it suddenly dawned on me I had this story deep in me with these boxes of stuff from when Billy died that it was too difficult to open. But 13 years on, I was thinking, I wonder what I wrote at the time. And I was reading through all this bile about how I hated people and how they were doing it wrong and all this. And I thought, oh, this could become a story in comics form. So I signed up to do a master's in that. But at the same time, we'd had a second child, a daughter, Sally, who was 12 in 2009. I think she was slightly embarrassed that I was immersing myself in death, because I was preoccupied with our approach to death, which is so common, and why there's a slight taboo around it, and also about being a mother with a child and then without a child, and that change in identity. So we started collaborating on this funny little zine. I don't know if I should call it zine, because it was properly printed, and we were just convinced it was going to make our millions. It didn't really, but it was really good fun, and it was that thing of collaboration, which is a word you might have mentioned it already, and that's a really important part. And I've put this in because it's really funny. This is in licorice. So it wasn't just, I did some dog cartoons, but we lived in a village in rural England, in Lincolnshire, where nothing happens. But they have, in rural England, they have this thing called the produce show, where all the local people come in with these enormous marrows, and like you get a prize for the biggest marrow. And there's always arts and crafts, and there's knitted stuff, knitted toys, that kind of thing. They had this category, and me and my husband John and Sally, our daughter, used to enter everything, like, you know, sculptures made from vegetables. But there was one called digitally enhanced photography. So I entered this. I thought, it's brilliant. Not only did I not win, I didn't even get a yellow Post-it note with critical feedback. I got nothing. It was just slightly embarrassed, where people had holiday views of the sea. So what I did, I just thought, well, I'll show them. And every year, from then on, I'd do a similar one, and I kept entering it, and I kept getting, they just like politely ignore it. And then they took away the category, because I thought I could go on till I'm like 105, just until they give in. But I thought it was quite funny for that. And this is another bit from Licorice, which was, we had a dog who aspired to be a pedigree, so we kept trying to, and this is Sally's page, so she was doing kind of poo jokes, but it was really fun. She did some lovely cryptozoology bit. And this is John put in a page. Some people see pictures in clouds or in crackling fires. For those moments when you're at a loose end or bored, why not try and find pictures in your navel? That's his very own navel in those days. But at the end of each Licorice, I slipped in a chapter of this rather heavy, serious, all squashed, a bit what became Billy Me New. And then we sent it to, I was also, as an academic, becoming immersed in the comics, very small and very friendly comics scene in the UK, in London particularly. And then I was giving Licorice out, and then the publisher who picked it up saw it there and said, we'd like to publish it. And the first thing they said, which made my heart sink, don't give up the day job. So there's that realization. People keep saying that through my life. But what it didn't make in money, it got me a lot of publicity that meant I could apply for funding and status. But really what I need to talk about here today is what happened along the way, which is I made friends with an artist called Sarah Lightman, and who's similar to me, with more of a fine art thinking background and interest, but coming into comics as not traditional comics, but more autobiographical, to tell her own story. And so we really connected over intellectually compatible, and also with discussing this isolation that you mentioned of working on your own on a long form project. And still at this time, this is years ago now, so it was still quite masculine, and the groups that were meeting were interested in superhero type works. So we thought, wouldn't it be great to have a little, we can rent a place in London, we can bring a kettle, make cake, and invite people to come for free. And then quite quickly, we thought it would be a book club, but quite quickly it became inviting guests. And then we started this thing of, we wanted to invite people who were better than us, because then you can become their friends and learn from them. And it's still going, and it was just so fascinating and brilliant. And we had a few rules, and this is something that I might talk later, you know, if you come up to me. But one of them, it needed to be London because of that, critical mass of people coming to it. It needed to be free because it was London. So we rented a very affordable space, which was it was the price of a round in a pub. So we could do it. And then we brought all our stuff. We brought a projector, that kind of thing. But very quickly we made friends, and very quickly we realized there was nothing like it at the time. So it was this community, and it was just doing it ourselves. And this is, I wonder if I can make this play, because this is what we became. Do you think?
Prihranite 20 do 60% na številna ležišča. East, Scandinavian Sleeping and Living.
Will it go? There we go. Okay, it worked. Isn't that great? Although, can I get back to my PowerPoint? Nope, completely lost. Oh, here we go. Got it. Technically. So what I wanted to talk about, a brief interlude, really, to talk about this idea of do-it-yourselves. I'm going to slip into Greek, no, just into Latin. So, well, it's a little bit of the theory, but it's not really. I was just thinking about how something like LDC and most of us here will do is we can describe what we're doing as grassroots or DIY, and this DIY is bandied about, and the last year or so I've had a bit of trouble with this term, and I'm just going to run through why. The invention, the term DIY originated in North America in the 50s, so it was a term for home improvement, and there was a literal reference to a crude makeshift material practice. And then in the 1960s, the counterculture, experimental, collective, self-sufficient living began to incorporate this term, so that it starts to become more familiar to us. But there's a German writer and theorist, Florian Kramer, who identifies the commodification of the term appearing in 1970 in the Whole Earth Catalogue, which was an alternative lifestyle periodical and product catalogue. So basically you could start to buy DIY. And at the same time, of course, in the late 1970s, punk rock subculture emerged with a similar DIY ethos that anyone could do anything. You could be a fashion designer, musician, artist. So DIY informed my teenage years, certainly, and approach to life. The raw anarchy of popular culture movements such as punk reflected this political outrage and disaffection with the status quo and conservative government, certainly in the UK under Margaret Thatcher. So what Thatcher proposed was equality of opportunity as a replacement for a pursuit of equality, and the aim for the right to be unequal and the freedom to be different. So what was quietly happening there, as feminist Nancy Fraser writes, it was a time that a rising neoliberalism declared war on social equality. So what I would argue that despite and because of Thatcher, DIY took on this subtle shift in meaning with an emphasis on the individual, this neoliberal idea of the individual, the make it yourself. In other words, the yourself became imbued with this ideology and celebration of individualistic entrepreneurship and consumerism. DIY became the commodity of Thatcher's children. So what, you may think? Well, the relevance to this about feminist comics in Britain, certainly when I was researching feminist comics, and I'll talk a little more if there's time, it was identified as the collective, or the collectivism was an essential ingredient in the emergence and the process of making. And, you know, collectivism was significant in wider feminist activism, such as consciousness raising. It didn't happen individually, it happened through groups coming together, just like we are now. So my point is this feminist activism based on the ideology of the group, not the individual. And yet DIY seems to be, it's already featured, we know Riot Girl zines was about making and coming together. But what's happening is, you know, there's this kind of, you know, get a ticket to make zines and pay 15 euros or whatever it is. And it's like, hang on a minute, this isn't quite the ideology of the zine. So it's just a little question. And my conclusion on that is I propose a shift in terminology to call it do it ourselves, to call attention to the necessity of actually working together towards change. So then I wanted to have a little talk about friendship as methodology and collaboration. And again, this is something I've been saying for a while, friendship as methodology, because it's like here, you know, you go to an academic conference and you sleep through the papers and then you have a coffee and you have a really deep talk with someone and think, yes, that's the solution. So it's that sort of friendship idea. But this summer I had a dinner with a bunch of people who we found everyone around the table had a connection to the Quakers, to the Quaker religion, which I've sort of thought of as a nice kind of religion, because I don't think you have to believe very heavily in God. And what they pointed out was, I don't know if it's the same, but in the UK, they have Friend's House. So there's actually a title at the top saying Friend's House. And I'd never made that connection of friends, as in sitting around having a beer, and friends, as in joining together to sit round and share ideas or be quiet. But I think when I claim friendship as methodology, basically I think the Quakers may have got there before me, but it's still really nice, and collaboration is part of it. So on my own personal journey, in 1999, we moved from London and bought a derelict place in Lincolnshire, in this countryside in the UK, and we renovated it ourselves, or we kind of project managed it, and it was that realization of transferable skills, but also working closely with someone. So it's not comics, but it's still relevant because it's about coming together. And then we thought, this is my partner and I, and we realized we worked together so well, let's start a visual arts organization. So it was all about the visual arts, but it taught me so much about people, and again about, we did that for several years, and I was project manager, and it taught me about how you get an audience and how you gather an audience and how you keep an audience awake, which is tea and biscuits, and then highly motivated by and explaining. It was quite difficult conceptual art sometimes, and it was about explaining. And then when I set up LDComics with Sarah, it was like, phew, this is easy. Everyone loves a comic. Everyone will come, and there's no difficulty in understanding it or that sort of hierarchy of something like fine art and the gallery type work. So we had, my little clip showed that we developed some festivals. We had one ready, and we got funding for them at the same place in March 2020. What a time to have that. March was quite significant for you too, I'm sure. So the week before the UK went into lockdown, and we thought, oh, what should we do? We can't, we've spent all the money, we've got it all lined up, we can't run it. And I think that when you were talking about the digital, this is when we went, of course, well, we'll put it online. And so we did that. And I really like what you say. It's this, there's nothing that can duplicate the being together and sharing sweaty, experiences of being in a room together or face to face. However, as a backup, it's brilliant, and as a support. So we continued what were our monthly meetings in person. We continued them online, and we still do. And there are definite benefits of reaching out. One is that it's the accessibility. So now we can start to invite guests from around the globe rather than just people who can get to London in time. And that's amazing. And also even people from, say, the north of England who don't have the mobility or the financial wherewithal to travel to our meetings. So that continues. And if you want to be involved, talk about it. What also happened that month was there was a huge exhibition, UK Unfinished Business, the Fight for Women's Rights at the British Library, and my PhD supervisor, Margaretta Jolly, was in charge of that and commissioned us to do a poster that was in the shop. I don't know what happened to that, but that was a nice sort of, it's not what we usually do, but we're all women. Oh, because I set it up, LDComics, with my friend who then stepped down, but we then became a proper organisation, a legal entity, and there's 5 of us now on the board. And over the years, some people have stepped down and some have joined. And so we each run different strands. And for anyone who is interested in the coffee breaks over the next couple of days, who wants to talk about how we run or compare notes, always, or get involved in some way, or collaborate or partner. Also March 2020, my academic book came out. Didn't get. So that had to be that went under this. So this is basically LDC's CV. So one of the things that we've done as well is just the past year, we've started introducing residencies, and really let's talk about that. Some of them are comics, but that's me and my spouse, John, who run those, but we have some particularly for LDC. And also this, but then bringing in the digital is we're launching, one of our members is launching a strand of online comics fair, which is quite an interesting model. Again, come and talk to me if you want to find it more. So, all right, that's that bit. I just want to run through a little bit of some historical examples to show how my research taught me about feminism and where I got the ideas from, or not got the ideas, but realised it's not us inventing it, it's been done forever, and particularly in cartoons. So this is an anti-suffrage cartoon, and they were all the rage in the 1910s. And this was the time when, of course, the suffragettes, suffragism, the women's suffrage was a massive threat to society. This is in the UK. Of course, this is how the suffragettes were depicted by men, not joining the suffrage movement because of a quest for justice, but an equality or any intellectual reasons, because they were too ugly and old to get married. So my PhD was particularly interested in the use of humour, and ugliness was humourless and angry. So that was one of the things. So this was the stereotype, and just around we're all familiar with the power of comics or cartoons, political cartoons, and the power of stereotypes as well. But this context that this type of cartoon emerged in the UK at the time is really interesting, because these were on postcards, but in England at that time there were 6 postal deliveries a day. 6 a day. So you could send a postcard in the morning and it could arrive by lunchtime. That's quicker than an email for me. So it's we think we're faster, but that was what's happening. But think of that landing, all that landing, and there was a point when, what was it? Yes, the postal regulations changed in 1908. So at first a postcard was just written text, but then when they allowed an image on one side, this was like it's basically a propaganda platform, isn't it? So promoting and reinforcing these ideologies. So what the suffragettes did is they retaliated in a way with their own form of humour. This isn't a postcard, but it's a pretty well-known one done by collectives. There were 2 main artist collectives in the UK, the Artist Suffrage League in 1907 and Suffrage Atelier 1909. And these women were all highly trained artists from the Slade School, and they didn't work alone, they worked as groups, and they did involve men. So that's a good point. What you're saying is their brothers and husbands or fathers were supportive of what they were doing. But it's through this visual language that they were circulating posters, leaflets, and postcards as part of their campaign. But the humour isn't directed at the people, it's directed at the system, and that's the subtle difference in the type of humour. So jumping on, this is a much later cartoon, which is so brilliant, referencing Greenham Common in the 80s and the protest against nuclear weapons. So you hold hands for 10 years, then this big cloud of non-violence comes down and suffocates the military. That's the theory. Anyway, and actually it's very funny and sort of lighthearted, but actually it's true. It's just you get together and hang on tight, and eventually maybe something will happen, but I love that sort of. And then this is the cartoons, just to go back and tell you about my research, which was into UK feminist cartoons, comics from the 70s. Very British context only. That was my interest, and my PhD fences, parameters. I went to the British Library, and I got funding for this, so I went to the British Library and said, bring out all your comics by women. And there was like one dog-eared comic that came forth, and I was thinking, oh no, this is a disaster. Where on earth am I going to look? I've got 4 years to fill. And then I just stepped slightly sideways to the feminist section, and it's there that I found this is where cartoons were being made from the 70s onwards by women in feminist periodicals, in feminist zines, we might call them now. And that was like, oh, of course. So they weren't making the mainstream because the humor, the style, everything about it, subject matter was not of interest to the masculine endeavor. So this is a really nice group who are still, what's great is a lot of these women are still alive, so I was able to chat to them. But this, the Sea Red Women's Workshop, was a group again of post-art school women who formed a collective and produced screen prints. So again, a similar low-tech method to the suffragettes of easy transportable, cheap to produce, quick to produce, and you can, put it out there, duplicate. So they worked not alone, they used visual language and circulated posters, leaflets, postcards again. So they had a studio in Camden Town, which is an area of North London. And they put a poster in the window, much like this one. And this is 1976. In 24 hours of that poster being, and it's not like, does it look offensive by today's standards? They had a brick thrown through their window. And then later they had a studio in South London and they had it torched. So it was really, it feels so shocking now when this is like pretty anodyne that this was, it's still a threat to society in the 70s, which didn't feel like it at the time. But what was interesting talking to them, two things. Well, first of all, it was interesting to hear they had shared a studio. They were also having children, so they were also sharing meals. They were also sharing childcare. So it's again it's this interweaving life with practice. And when I first came across them and went to the talk, I said, oh, this is utterly brilliant because you were making comics. And they were saying, we weren't making comics or cartoons. But because it's language, the language and image, I think that it counted. It does count. And this is something I found in the Women's Liberation Workshop, who produced a pamphlet to go with the protest, which again, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but in 1970, they protested against the mine's gone blank, the Miss World, the huge Miss World, and they did it they got in and then they threw flour and ink bombs. So it was all very sort of theatrical and very kind of humorous, but I was pleased that they'd also accompanied it with this pamphlet. And again, they were a group of women, and a lot of women were meeting through these consciousness-raising groups where women were coming together very informally in their front room to chat about their lives and share experiences. So Spare Rib in England, Spare Rib was the feminist periodical that came out in the 70s, again set up as a cooperative by two women, and always run on a voluntary kind of basis, or that sort of low-tech grassroots, but at that time it was a way of sharing information about what's happening, what protests, campaigns, and information. So it was information sharing. And every single issue carried cartoons by women, so that was a brilliant find for me. And then the cartoonists who appeared in Spare Rib became friends, got to know each other, and then started as other periodicals emerged which had money attached, like the academic one, Feminist Review. They could commission artists to put cartoons in. And Sour Cream is another one. Another group of artists, again, came together as a collective, as a way of showing their works together, so doing it for themselves. And by the 80s, what had happened was that it's still this idea of women creating platforms for their own work and their own stories and becoming their own audience as well. So during the 80s, there were 11 feminist publishers set up. So it's taking it to the next step. And they were commissioning feminist stories, mostly prose, but 4 of them published women's cartoon books. And then there were 64 feminist bookshops set up around England. So again, you can start to see, this is how it works. You set up you get the cartoonists gathering together, then you get the publications, and then you get the distribution set up. So it's this amazing model, but all done themselves together. And so this then became one of the books, a director of the Women's Press with 64 artists. So again, it's a platform for artists to then get further work, is how it worked. And this is a final one from Susie Varty, Heroine, another collective, and Ceasefire. So, okay, I've got a little rant I could go on to. Might be about 5-7 minutes. Have you the energy? Yes, shall I do it? Right. But do we still need women only or women-led activity? No, of course we don't, because we have equality. So, I mean, this is always things, surely not. And this is a little example of why we might. But I need to do a disclaimer, because it's about an exhibition by some good friends of mine. And so I have to make a disclaimer, because Paul Gravett has been one of the most supportive people in my life as a comics artist, and actually I wouldn't be here without him, but he was one of the curators. So what I'm saying here is what I'm interested in is the pattern, the structure, not the people. It's not an attack on all men are bastards. So, and by the way, it's also not sour grapes, because my book was in the exhibition. So you can't really, so there we are. Here we go. So it's not a moan, but it's to interrogate how subtle activity functions to reinforce a capitalist status quo and how this overlaps with capitalism. So Paul Gravett, most generous. So three men curators. Paul Gravett, we know. Adrian Edwards, who's a curator at the British Museum, British Library, which is one of the biggest, institutions in the UK. Also completely generous with his information sharing to me and conversation about the exhibition. And the third one was, I forget, another man. So there we are, John Harris. Also very, well respected. So the point of the exhibition, first to highlight, was to work with the archive at the British Library. And the archive, as we probably all know already, historically, in most pursuits, is a masculine endeavour. So in my research at the British Library, it was, as I've said, it wasn't through comics, it was the archive of women's work that I found my research material. Because of much feminist activity in Britain has been grassroots. Part of it, there's two things. Part of it was about the group, therefore it wasn't about the ego, it wasn't about the name. So if you do come across stuff, there's no names, which is really irritating for an academic researcher decades on, but it was to make a point, it's not about the male ego. And secondly, why would they put their publications in the institutional archive if they were anti the institution? So it's a kind of, you can see the point, but it's slightly annoying. So therefore, the archive for comics is masculine. Notes. All right, so on the right, on that side is, oh yeah, I have to say the things about it. I didn't say. All right, curated by three men, the poster design, some may recognise by Jamie Hewlett, who did Tank Girls. The exhibition design was by Dave McKean. This exhibition was accompanied by a really high production, full colour catalogue book. Had 87 images, works by men, 8 works by women. The index had names of 231 men, 37 women. So although the exhibition itself, and let me just tell you this exhibition had more visitors to the British Library than any other exhibition they've ever done. So it's kind of this two-pronged thing of, yeah, comics, yeah. And it's like, fucking hell, where are the women kind of thing? And yet the exhibition did have women because, as I say, my book was in there, but I think they at the final moment put stuff in the exhibition that didn't make it into the catalogue. So, for example, my name's not in the catalogue, my work's not in the catalogue. What that means, the catalogue, the printed object, still a need for that, because that's what turns up in the archive at the moment. In 20 years, it may be different, but the internet isn't a reliable source yet. But what was interesting then, so I was chewing all this over, and then I had a great conversation with Adrian Edwards, because I was saying, how come the poster how come you commissioned Jamie Hewlett to do that poster and not Angela Carter, whose work was in it, and who I'd loved her work as a feminist artist. She was well known by us in the 70s. And they were like, well, the thing is, we've got to sell tickets. We've got to make money. And Jamie Hewlett is a big name, and you know, compared to Angela Carter, because I was saying she's still alive, she could have done something new. So I like, all right, it's difficult to argue with that. They have to make money to continue the exhibition, blah, blah, blah. So then I said, and also I find, it might be me, but I find it a bit sexualized. And they were going, oh, no, Nicola, you're wrong. It's the best-selling poster in the shop, mostly to young women. I went, oh, maybe it's because I'm old then. But I just don't quite get it. I know. Anyway, what was interesting, he said, the original sketch for this poster was the character standing with a spray paint can in one hand and a cigarette in the other. And I was thinking, wow, that really conveys a very different message about that character. It's much more kind of whatever the word is, you know. So I said, oh, what happened? Well, London Underground is our main sponsor, advertising sponsor, but they said, you're not allowed to show anything smoking, you're not allowed to show vandalism, it's got to go. So again, so it's not their choice, it's the system. They had to, you know, it's a big advertising partnership, they had to advertise, it's capitalism. So very briefly, the next, Paul Gravett was also co-curated this, which was a brilliant show around the corner from the British Library. Did you go, Esther? Wasn't it brilliant? And it was global, it was women, it was really high spec, high end. It was a very small gallery that has since closed down. It was a private gallery, whereas the British Library is publicly funded. And it didn't have the budget, because it was private, didn't have the budget for the publication, for the printed catalogue. So it had some presence online, but I don't think it's still there. So again, that's that weakness. And then the year after, Kath Tate comes along, and Kath Tate was one of my case studies for my PhD. In the 80s, in her front room, she started making postcards and selling them around the feminist bookshops, and she met some feminist cartoonists and produced postcards of feminist cartoons in the 80s and 90s. And I remember her cartoons, they were so funny. So she was doing that, carting cards around, literally as like we do with the zines we might produce to the shops. She's still going, she's still around. And when I talked to her about, you know, women and cartoons, she went, yes. Well, in the 90s, I went to the Cartoon Museum and I said, there needs to be an exhibition of women cartoonists. And they said, oh, no one will come. And anyway, we haven't got the money. So now she's Kath Tate cards. She's got a very successful greeting card business. So she went back, and there's a woman director at the Cartoon Museum. She strolled in and said, hey, how about it? And Anita's like, oh, yes, lovely idea. We don't have any money. She pulls out of her bag a wedge of used notes and says, how about now? So money talks, wealth whispers, someone said. Anyway, money always talks. So they came together, and this is the group that curated it. So it has nothing to do with the exhibition, but all the women who were in my PhD research turned up and put work in. And it was... they were hanging it just before the opening. So it was kind of quite DIY in a way, or DIO. But who cares? We were all gathered having a lovely time. And then Corinne, who's the editor at Myriad, and I've been going, you've got to have a publication, you've got to have... So we did it after the show, and the Inking Woman is what came out of that. So we could put in the people that naturally we had got forgotten. Oh no, we didn't have so-and-so. So it's a really nice book, and it's a kind of archive of that. And then finally, I think this is still happening. So this is a final slide of some of the anthologies that have come from Britain or America, really, Drawing Power and Menopause, and Draw the Line is a British one. So, and that's MK. And then, just to remind us, there's no such thing as a single issue struggle, because we don't have single issues. That's It's a little theoretical quote for you. And this is my final slide. No, second from final. So this is the residency. So this is where, and I'm completely come to the same conclusion as you, that actually it's interesting. We're told, particularly as an organisation, and I won't go on, but please come and chat to me if it interests you. We're told all the time to be bigger and better and make more money and go for more funding and expand. And I just think, no, we should be smaller and we should be worse. And you know what I mean? We should be having intimate little dinners and really going in depth. So I think it's, again, that's that capitalism, the ideology that's imposed on us of to be successful, you have to last forever, you have to have a bricks and mortar place, and you've got to have everything documented. But actually, it's the smaller events that are so much more meaningful. And also, everyone refers to it as a retreat. So we say it's about advance, not retreat, because it's not about coming out of the world. It's about preparing to be part of the world. What have I put? Nothing in nature works on its own, including us. That's lovely, isn't it? I think I may have even written that myself. That'll be it.
Thank you so much, Nicola. You squeezed a lot of thoughts there, because you do a lot and you work a lot. I really love this idea of the retreat, which is actually not a retreat, but getting ready for going out. And personally, the other thought that has stayed with me, and I will moderate a discussion in the end, so I'm now giving cues to the guests of the discussion, is how it's about the structure, not the individuals, and how the logic of the system of capitalism and neoliberalism takes over our dreams, really, and our possibilities by this idea of growing, and we need degrowth in our communities, not just in our economies. So we have a couple of minutes for questions, because we would like to keep this conference on time. And before the break, I would like to give you guys a chance to ask Nicola anything, or almost anything. If you don't, I will.
If we need like 30 seconds just to digest.
Yeah, so this is for you. So what I'm interested in...
Oh, there was one.
Yeah, I have a question about this LDC.
Oh, yeah.
I have a question about this LDC organization. What does the residents host, festivals, or is it possible for foreign authors to collaborate there and get a place to stay? Please explain.
Yeah, have I time? Stop me if I go too.
will.
It's we've developed it as a model, so it's across the summer months, and it's pay what you can. And myself and John are both artists, so it's our home, and we have 6 people at a time that we can accommodate. And we have guidelines. We have it all on the Grange Project's website, so I'll chat to you in the break. But exactly, I think we're really open to partnerships of, it would be amazing to have a Balkan residency. Let's do it. 6 countries, we've got 6 bedrooms. So but we ask for people to apply. So what we're interested in is the critical engagement. So it's people who are working on something. So what you see, the people come and go, oh, it's so lovely to be on this retreat. I never get time to just have a holiday. And John and I go, no, you've got it. It's not a holiday. But what it is John and I love to cook. So we cook the lunch and the dinner. Everything is there. It's 10 acres. It's just stunning. And it's peaceful. You have your own room. There's a kiln. There's a printing place to make a mess. There's space. And every evening we come together and have discussions. So people do presentations about what they're working on. They show bits they're stuck with, and we are part of that. So we're restructuring for 2025. We're going to run less but more. So they're going to be 10-day blocks, and people will apply, and there'll be one a month from May, June, July, August, September, one a month. and we're opening for applications in November. But it's, yes, totally open to everyone. And it's pay what you can. But the reason we ask for funding is we don't want to go for public funding because it's too much. Why should we? But we can't afford to run it. And it's not just the food. It's the Grange. The Grange, we live at the Grange because we have a very nice relationship with the owners. And so we pay a nominal rent in return for looking after the place. So that's what we're passing on. But we still have costs, and we have to run it all year round to open it in the summer. So if that makes some sort of sense. So we have guidelines of what we need to generate. But what that can mean is it's not about your income, it's about if you can afford, if you have I earn nothing, but I go on the most tremendous holidays somehow because that's the way I choose to spend my money, right? So it's about your disposable income or what you spend your money on. So that's what you pay as a contribution, and if you can't, then it seems to level out. So that gives you a sense of it, but it's really about time and being with other people. But what's happened over the last 2 years we've run it is people have formed really nice friendships and continued their kind of critical feedback groups, which is really a bonus for us. And we've had people from other countries this year and last year as well. So yeah,
Thank you.
Come.
Maybe after a few years I could afford, because I'm also a beginner.
But also the other thing is people have, in their own countries, applied for funding and then come. So it's not, so I think that's a possibility, that you get funding and then put in your funding bid an amount that you can come and spend the time here. Yeah, you're a beginner, yes. But it's not a school. It's not a courses.
So I also have a question about the LDC community, namely that you mentioned that it started as an idea to bring people together, and now it has become super institutionalized and even international. I think this is an institution. That's what I meant. So not in a critical way.
In that way. Okay, yeah.
In a positive way. Sorry about that. I think many of us here are on the brink of, we are full of enthusiasm and we want to start stuff, but it's very difficult to organize. So what was a big moment for you, or that you overcome, or that helped you guys really stick together and keep on doing this? Because you mentioned COVID, there are hardships. We already mentioned finances, and everybody knows all the differences. Yeah. But what we see is that LDC is growing and growing. So, at the beginning, how do you go from a seed to a plant?
Well, at the beginning, and I have to say this, it was really important that we never charged. There was no money involved, so we never paid ourselves. But that enabled us also to feel comfortable inviting big names. So Posy Simmons, who in the UK is big, was one of our first guests. Trina Robbins came. Alison Bechdel came for no fee. And we could do that. If we were ticketing it, if you ticket an event, you can't then not pay the artists. It's just not right. So we feel strongly that. And also people in London have no money, so they could come and not feel an obligation. And we would give cake and tea free, obviously we made it. So we could do that. But what was interesting is we did it not for other people. Me and Sarah did it for myself, and I'd just come from this background of audience development for the arts, so I was like, what if no one comes? I mean, my mum should be here in a minute, and my sister's promised to come, and I had my friend with her newborn baby coming to just look really crowded, and then Sarah went, well, it doesn't matter. We've got each other. We can have a lovely hour and chat and have a cup of tea about our work. Oh yeah. And then, but because it's comics and everyone loves comics and also we called it, that goes, in the beginning, we thought it would just be a little fun thing with 5 people. And so it was just a laugh. We called it Ladies Do Comics, spelt like girls. And it was supposed to have this reference to 70s. I had it all plotted. Anyway, first thing that happened, we never said it was women only, but we had some of our men friends from the comics creeping in going, are we allowed? Is it okay if we come? And it was quite nice because it felt a slight reversal of you know, I don't know, that the other clubs had been run in pubs, which Sarah doesn't drink alcohol, and I don't love going to pubs on my own. And it was a particularly dark one with, they have them in London with, probably not anymore, slippery floors, you know. So we just wanted a kind of a friendly atmosphere where you could come on your own and you could feel welcome. So it was nice to put the men, not that it's a men-women thing, but it's nice to kind of backfoot them a little bit. It made us laugh. And so, and then people did come, and we had like 70 people come a time, and it was brilliant. It was really, and it has been now. So even online, we have between 70 and 100 people book every month. But all the time we say, so we're not paid, we don't have salary, but we have these different strands. So although we don't have a salary, LDC is bigger than anything I will ever do. It's bigger than my work on my own. So at a certain point, people just know me as the organizer who does, oh, aren't you that woman who makes tea and organizes things? and then I go, no, I'm a comic artist. But at the same time, it benefits me because then people, you know, like, you know about me through LDC, probably not my brilliant, by the way, brilliant recommended reading that I've published. So I think that's what happens. And we always had this rule, as soon as you're bored, we close it, we stop it. We don't have to do it. As long as we don't have funding, we're not obliged. And then we did slip down the funding route for some of the festivals, but that was fun. It was a fun experiment. Worked well. Yeah, so there's 5 members, and we each do what we want with the... So I'm interested in the residencies, and I did get a lot of funding with a British Council project that I wanted to do, and Emma does the mentoring. She manages that. So we have a bank of women, and that's paid. So there is paid stuff that, you know, you can sign up and get a series of mentoring sessions. And Wallace does her thing. So we each have our strand. So it's not onerous, but it always is. So anyway, I
love how you reconsider the structures in which we live, beginning from what we drink and how the drinks organize our relationships to what we do, and like having the humility to make tea in spite of being the author of a recommended reading. So this is a lot of food for thought for us.
It's about care, isn't it? It's about caring for each other, isn't it? And that's that residency thing, coming together with care, looking after each other. There was another thing. We had one member who was, and this is why we changed our name, she said, listen, I just think it's time that we grew up and Ladies Do Comics becomes LDComics. And she was saying, you know DC Comics? Do you know DC Comics? And she's going, right, do you know what it stands for? And we're like, no. Does anyone know? DC Comics? No. Yeah, detective, you do, because you're highly, highly educated actor in the comics world. So Detective Comics. And she was saying, you see, it doesn't matter, but it just makes it, because people started going, oh, I wanted to go to Ladies Comics, but the name's so babyish and stupid, and you know, that they started after a few years. In the beginning, so it was dangerous. We started as a little joke, just 2 of us having fun, and then as it got bigger, we thought, oh, we've got to tidy up. But Charlotte, this was Charlotte Bailey, and then she said, right, let's get organised. Like, she was brilliant. She did the website. She did that promo thing. So she said, why don't we have, because we always have to generate a bit of money, like to pay the accountant, that kind of thing. Why don't we have a membership scheme? So she kind of presented it all to us. And then she was like, yeah, and all you'd need to do is upload some new stuff on the website. And, you know, it's all you have to do. And I'm like, when you say all you have to do, who do you think is going to do that? So you can have these great ideas of how to monetize what you're doing, but someone's got to do it. And it's, how do you get paid? And as soon as you're paying yourself, you've got to pay everyone else. And as soon as you, I don't know. So she went to so much trouble, and we just sat there going, nah, we'll just keep it like it is. So every time we meet for our AGM, the first item on our AGM every year, annual general meeting is how to access the website, which we're all supposed to do. So that takes us about an hour. Oh, have you got the code on your... And then we dance, and then we have, probably time for some cocktails but the point I'm making is like we always have this thing of what should we do? Do we need to do it? What can we not do? What do we want to do? Who wants to bail out? And so on. So it's quite difficult, really difficult.
I didn't want to finish on the note of difficult, but we will. So I invite everybody to dance and be kind to each other and drink cocktails for 10 minutes. And we will continue our program at 35 with another talk of another methodology of organizing communities. So you can also approach Nicola.
Yes.
Let's give another round of applause to her.
Thank you.